The shallow grave was discovered on a Tuesday morning, just as the Lagos sun began to pierce through the morning mist. What the police found buried beneath 3 feet of red earth would shatter a mother's world and expose the deadly price of desperation. But this story begins 5 years earlier, in a quiet village where hope died slowly, one empty plate at a time. Mama Ebube stood behind her wooden counter, watching the empty road stretch endlessly toward the horizon. The roadside canteen that had once buzzed with laughter and the clatter of spoons against bowls now sat silent, save for the occasional truck rumbling past without stopping. It had been 3 years since her husband's funeral, 3 years since she'd watched his coffin disappear into the earth alongside her dreams of a different life. The malaria had taken him quickly, leaving behind 4 daughters and debts that seemed to multiply like weeds after rain. "Mama, I'm hungry," Amarachi whispered, tugging at her wrapper. At barely 15, she was the youngest of the 4 sisters, her eyes still holding the innocence that poverty hadn't yet stolen. Mama Ebube's heart clenched. She reached into the pot of watery soup, more water than ingredients, and ladled a small portion into a bowl. "Share with your sisters," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging in her chest. Ebube, now 22 and the eldest, watched her mother with eyes that had grown old too fast. She understood the mathematics of their survival, 4 school fees they couldn't afford, 4 mouths to feed with a business that barely fed one, and a mother whose hands were bleeding from working with nothing to show for it. "The landlord came again today," Ebube said quietly, after her younger sisters had gone to bed on empty stomachs. "His threatening eviction." Chika, 21 and fierce like her late father, slammed her hand on the table. "Let him try. Where else will he find tenants in this forgotten place?" But Nnenna, gentle at 20, shook her head. "Fighting won't fill our stomachs or pay school fees. Maybe we should consider moving to the city. Find work." "With what money?" Mama Ebube asked, her voice hollow. "And what work? We have no education, no connections, nothing but our prayers." That night, as her daughters slept on thin mats, sharing the single blanket between them, Mama Ebube stared at the ceiling and made bargains with God. She promised to be better, to work harder, to sacrifice anything, if only he would send them a miracle. She should have been more careful about what she prayed for. The miracle arrived on a Wednesday morning in the form of 3 black SUVs that pulled up to her canteen like a parade of promises. Out stepped men in expensive Agbada robes and gleaming watches, their bellies round with prosperity, their laughter loud enough to wake the village from its perpetual slumber. "Mama, give us your best food," called the loudest one, a man whose gold teeth caught the sunlight. "We're traveling to Abuja and heard your jollof rice is legendary." Mama Ebube's hands trembled as she served them. These were the men she'd heard about, politicians, oil contractors, business moguls who threw money around like confetti. The kind of men who could solve all her problems with the loose change in their pockets. As they ate, their eyes wandered to her daughters, who had emerged from the back room to help serve. Ebube moved with quiet grace, her natural beauty unmarked by the hardships they'd endured. Chika's laughter rang like music when one of the men cracked a joke. Nnenna's shy smile made them lean closer, and even young Amarachi's innocence seemed to draw their attention. "Beautiful daughters you have," the gold-toothed man said, his voice carrying implications that made Mama Ebube's skin crawl and her mind race simultaneously. In Lagos, girls like these, they could have everything. Beautiful houses, cars, university education. After they left, pressing crisp naira notes into her palm, more money than she'd seen in months, Mama Ebube sat alone in her canteen and felt something shift inside her chest. It wasn't hope exactly, but something darker, more desperate. "Mama, who were those men?" Amarachi asked, counting the money with wide eyes. "Opportunity," Mama Ebube whispered, not recognizing her own voice. The men returned the following month, and this time they weren't subtle about their intentions. "Your daughter Ebube," the gold-toothed man, who'd introduced himself as Alhaji Musa, said quietly, pulling Mama Ebube aside. "I could take care of her." Lagos is full of opportunities for a smart, beautiful girl. Mama Ebube's stomach churned, but she heard herself asking, what kind of opportunities? A job in my company. A nice apartment. She could send money home, help her family. His smile was predatory, but his wallet was thick. I'm not like other men, Mama. I take care of what's mine. That night, Mama Ebube couldn't sleep. She walked outside and stared at the stars, trying to find answers in their distant light. Her daughters were beautiful, she'd always known this. In their small village, beauty felt like a burden, something to hide from prying eyes and wagging tongues. But in the world these men represented, beauty was currency. What harm could it do? She whispered to the darkness. Just until we get back on our feet. When Ebube left for Lagos the next week, her suitcase packed with new clothes Alhaji Musa had bought, she hugged her mother tightly. Take care of yourself, Mama Ebube whispered, her heart breaking and mending simultaneously. Send word as soon as you can. I will, Mama. I'll make you proud. Those were the last words Mama Ebube would ever hear her eldest daughter speak. With Ebube gone, money began flowing into their household like a river after drought. New dresses appeared. Phones materialized. The school fees were paid, and for the first time in years, there was meat in their soup. The village noticed, of course. Villages always notice. Where is Ebube getting this money? The neighbors whispered. You know what they say about Lagos girls, came the replies, loaded with judgment and envy. Mama Ebube silenced the gossips with the confidence that only financial security can bring. My daughter is working hard in Lagos, she'd say, lifting her chin. She's making something of herself. But the truth was, Ebube's calls were becoming shorter, her voice more distant. The money kept coming, transferred through mobile banking, but her daughter seemed to be fading away, becoming nothing more than digits on a screen. When another group of wealthy men visited, friends of Alhaji Musa, Mama Ebube found herself making the same calculations. Chika was strong, smart. She could handle herself in the city. And Nnenna, sweet, gentle Nnenna deserved beautiful things. You're sending us away, Amarachi accused one evening, her young face twisted with an understanding beyond her years. You're selling us. Don't be ridiculous, Mama Ebube snapped, but the words felt like ash in her mouth. I'm giving you opportunities. Do you want to stay here and rot like I did? Within 6 months, both Chika and Nnenna had left for Lagos with different men, different promises, different versions of the same lie. Mama Ebube told herself each night. This is temporary. This is survival. This is love. The call came on a Tuesday morning, just as Mama Ebube was preparing breakfast for herself and Amarachi, the only daughter she had left. Mama Ebube. The voice was official, cold. This is Inspector Gabriel from the Lagos State Police Command. We need you to come to Lagos immediately. It's about your daughter, Ebube. The phone slipped from her trembling hands. The shallow grave had been discovered during construction of a new housing estate. Ebube's body, what remained of it, bore the telltale signs of ritual killing, organs removed, specific body parts missing. The investigation revealed she'd been dead for 3 months, even as money continued flowing into Mama Ebube's account. Blood money, Inspector Gabriel explained with the weary tone of a man who'd seen too much evil. These ritualists, they keep paying the families to avoid suspicion. Your daughter, she wasn't the first. Mama Ebube collapsed in the police station, her screams echoing off the concrete walls. The guilt crashed over her in waves, each one threatening to drown her completely. She had delivered her own child to monsters, wrapped the transaction in dreams and necessity. The drive back to the village was the longest journey of her life. Every mile marker reminded her of Ebube's last trip home, how excited she'd been, how she talked about making money to help the family. How she trusted her mother completely. At home, Amarachi was waiting with news that completed the nightmare. Mama, something's wrong with Nnenna, she said, her voice shaking. She came home sick. Very sick. The doctor says it's HIV. She's dying, Mama. Nnenna was skeleton thin, her once glowing skin ashen and covered in lesions. She could barely lift her head from the mat where she lay, coughing blood into rags that Amarachi washed obsessively, as if cleanliness could wash away the disease. "Where is Chika?" Mama Ebube asked, though she already knew the answer would destroy her further. "Gone," Amarachi whispered. "She came back 2 weeks ago, crying, saying she couldn't live with what she'd become. She took her bag and left in the middle of the night. No one has seen her since." The canteen stood empty now, a monument to dreams deferred and daughters destroyed. Villagers crossed the street rather than pass too close, as if misfortune were contagious. The whispers had evolved from judgment to pity, which somehow felt worse. Nnenna died on a Thursday, just as the rains began. Her last words were an apology. "Mama, I'm sorry I couldn't send more money home." The funeral was small, poorly attended. The same villagers who had once envied their newfound wealth now looked at Mama Ebube with expressions of horror and disgust. She was no longer a struggling mother making hard choices, she was the woman who had traded her daughters for temporary comfort. Amarachi, now the sole survivor, had grown silent and hard. At 18, she possessed a bitter wisdom that aged her beyond her years. "Was it worth it, Mama?" she asked one evening as they sat in the empty canteen, surrounded by cobwebs and broken dreams. "The money, the clothes, the brief moment when we weren't hungry, was it worth losing them?" Mama Ebube had no answer. How could she explain that desperation had made the impossible seem logical? That poverty had convinced her that love looked like selling her children's dignity for their survival? "I thought I was saving you," she whispered. "You were saving yourself," Amarachi replied with devastating clarity. "From the shame of being poor, from the work of finding another way, from the patience it would have required to build something real." 3 years had passed since Ebube's murder, 2 since Nnenna's funeral. Chika remained missing, her fate unknown but certainly tragic. Mama Ebube aged rapidly, her hair white, her back bent under the weight of her choices. She spent her days walking between 2 graves in the village cemetery, Ebube's empty tomb. Her body remained in Lagos, and Nnenna's final resting place. The headstones were simple, their names carved in cheap concrete, nothing like the golden futures she had imagined for them. The canteen had collapsed, literally and figuratively. The wooden structure leaned dangerously, its roof partially caved in, weeds growing through the floorboards. No one bought food from the woman who had sold her daughters. Amarachi had left for the city, not Lagos, but the state capital, where she worked as a housemaid for a family that treated her kindly. She sent occasional letters but never visited. She had forgiven her mother, she wrote, but forgiveness didn't erase the distance between them. "I pray for you every day, Mama," one letter read. "But I cannot look at you without seeing their faces, without remembering what greed disguised as love can do to a family." On the 5th anniversary of Ebube's departure from the village, Mama Ebube knelt beside her daughter's memorial grave. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cemetery, and in the distance, she could hear the sound of children playing, their laughter a reminder of joy she would never feel again. She spoke to the headstone as if Ebube could hear her. "My daughter, I convinced myself that I was a good mother making hard choices. I told myself that poverty was the enemy, that anything was better than staying poor. But I was wrong. Poverty is hard, but shame and sorrow, they last longer than any hunger." A breeze rustled the palm trees overhead, and for a moment, Mama Ebube imagined it was Ebube's voice, carried on the wind from wherever her spirit now resided. "I gave you away like meat," she continued, echoing Amarachi's devastating words. "All for what? Bread that doesn't last? Money that turned to blood in my hands? I was so afraid of being poor that I became something worse, a mother who forgot that her children's dignity was worth more than gold." She stood slowly, her knees protesting against the years of carrying unbearable weight. In the distance, life continued, vendors calling their wares, motorcycles puttering along dirt roads, the eternal rhythm of survival that had once consumed her so completely. But for Mama Ebube, life had stopped the day she chose money over morality, The day she convinced herself that love could be measured in naira notes and temporary comfort. As she walked away from the graves, her footsteps echoed in the empty space between what was and what could have been. Behind her, the headstones stood sentinel over the dreams she had buried alive, reminding anyone who cared to remember that some prices are too high to pay, even when poverty makes every choice feel impossible. The village road stretched ahead of her, leading nowhere and everywhere, a path she would walk alone for whatever years remained to her. In her wake, she left the most expensive lesson a parent can teach, that there is no poverty worse than the poverty of the soul that comes from sacrificing our children on the altar of desperation. Some hunger, she had learned too late, should never be fed. This story serves as a stark reminder that desperation can make us lose sight of what truly matters. If this tale moved you, if it made you think about the choices we make when life pushes us to our limits, then please subscribe to this channel. Share this story with others who might need to hear it. Sometimes, the most important conversations are the hardest ones to have. Hit that notification bell, and let's continue exploring the complex realities of human choices together. Because in the end, our stories, the painful ones, the cautionary ones, the ones that make us uncomfortable, these are the stories that can save us from repeating the same mistakes. Subscribe now, and let's keep the conversation alive.